Today we're going to go over another deck building approach, and we're going to look at building a Reanimator style deck. So we're going to go over all the things you need to include in your Reanimator deck to make it as successful as possible, and we're going to go through the whole process right now. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And we're going to get into building this Reanimator style deck. So first of all, the most important thing we need in a Reanimator style deck, there's a couple of things that are the most important. There's the Reanimation spell, or the way of reanimating something, and we need to have the target of reanimation. And because reanimation is basically putting a creature into our graveyard and then casting it from the graveyard cheaper, we also need a way of discarding it. So some discard mechanic, some reanimation spell, and the target, the big creature we want to reanimate. Those are the most important things, but you might also want to have some other kind of protection, some other way of dealing with early threats. You want to have some kind of control aspect, so some removal or counter spells or something to stop the opponent from killing you while you set up your Reanimator. And then you basically end up getting a really big creature out on turn 4 or 5 or somewhere around there. And then the opponent might quit because they can't deal with it. So let's go through. First of all, let's start with what is the big thing we want to reanimate. So the best color combination, I think, for reanimating is Jund. So we have black, red, and green. Now we can go for all of these, or we can go for picking one or two of these colors. So we need to have a big target to reanimate, and we need to have a way of reanimating it. So black and green has some good reanimation spells. Does red have good reanimation spells? White has some good reanimation things as well, actually, because we have things like Invoke Justice. So we could go with red or white with reanimating. I think I'm going to go with a black and green deck for this one. So let's look at some big creatures that are black or green that we can reanimate. So the way you might want to do this is having a look at your rare and mythic cards, and maybe just anything that costs 6 or 7 mana to get out, and we're doing standard. So we just want to look at, not red. I mean, there's good red things to reanimate as well. You could reanimate an Atali. It's not very original, but you could do that. But so black and green. Let's see, what's the best things to reanimate with black or green? You can reanimate Flesh Gorgers. They come back as a 7/5 Menace lifelink. That's pretty hard to deal with. Or we could reanimate Toxrills. They're fun as well. Or what's a big green thing we can reanimate? Titan of Industry, T-Rex. We'll go with 2 of each, right? So we've got a variety of different things. Could also reanimate a Yargle. It's a 6 mana, big creature. Also, Goltat Mavrin would be a good one, but we're not going to include white in this one. So yeah, let's just go with green and black for now. So these are our reanimation targets. We just need to get a reanimation spell and a way of discarding it, and then fill in the gaps between that. So let's look at the reanimation spell next. So we can take these filters off, just looking at everything that's black or green, and we can just say return graveyard. In fact, you could even put in turn graveyard battlefield. And then this should give us everything that can return from the graveyard to the battlefield. Some things can return themselves, like Cult Conscript. You can pay 2 mana to return it. But we want to have some other way of returning things from our graveyard. We could go with a Geth. I haven't used Geth before. But other creatures get -1/-1, which would matter with Toxrill because we make 1/1 slugs. So we wouldn't want to have Toxrill if we're having Geth. So we'd have to figure out one or the other, unless we want to have some kind of other strategy of like when your creatures die, then the opponent loses life, that kind of thing. So you could do, I guess, with Toxrill, but like with Titan of Industry or the T-Rex, it doesn't matter if they get -1/-1, they're still going to be really big threats. So you could have Geth there. But I'm going to look somewhere else. Let's leave that there for now. What else is a really good Reanimator? Oh, Archpriest is a good Reanimator. So, backup 1, Death Touch. So they don't want to block it because it has Death Touch. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player or battle, return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So we could include a couple of these. Now they do cost 5 mana. So you get this out on turn 5. You can put the +1 counter, the backup one, onto anything else. That gains Death Touch and the ability to reanimate. So on turn 5 we could reanimate things. To be honest, I think normally turn 5 is about as early as you're going to get anything reanimated. So that's one good potential way to reanimate things. We can also... Invasion of Tolvada is really good, but that's white and black, so we're going to stick to just green and black. Diagraph Rebirth, there's a good one. So 5 mana again. It's a sorcery, costs 1 less for each creature that died this turn, and you can return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it has flashback, so we can use it twice. So if this gets milled or something, then we can still use it. So I'm going to include 4 of those. That's going to be our main reanimation strategy. It costs 5, but it can cost less if things die. So we might want to have a way of killing the opponent's things quicker, or we might want to attack with some things on turn 3. They get blocked, lots of things die, and then we can bring something back. So that's a good way of returning things from the battlefield, from the graveyard to the battlefield. The next thing we need to have is a way of discarding a card. We want to put things into the graveyard. We can't bring something back from the graveyard to the battlefield if it's not in the graveyard to start with. So let's look at ways that we can put things into the graveyard. So if we want to stick with the same colors, one thing we can do is just have a look at discard. So you've got some things where you might draw a card and discard. You've got ways that the opponent discards things. That doesn't help us. The Raven Man, each opponent discards a card, so that's not going to help us. So we want some way that we're going to discard things. If the opponent has something like a Graveyard Trespasser, just targeting it will help us discard a card, but you can't rely on that because who knows what they're going to have. If they do, that's a nice way of getting that out. Liliana is probably a good way of doing it. Each player discards a card, so we get Liliana out on turn 3, make the opponent discard something, which they don't want to do, presumably, but we do want to, so we get to discard one of our big things into our graveyard. So that's a good way of discarding things. We might want to have another method of discarding things as well, or milling maybe. So if we have Takenuma, we can mill 3 cards, although it does cost 4, so it's not going to happen too early on. But we can mill some cards. We can return something from our graveyard to our hand, but we don't have to. Or maybe we do have to if there is one, but if there's more than one, then we can still leave something in the graveyard. So we can make sure we have maybe 2 of those in the deck. We can also discard creature cards with Fauna Shaman. Discard a creature card and search your library for another creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand and shuffle. So we could maybe discard a Titan of Industry and find an Archpriest of Shadows maybe. So maybe that's a good way of reanimating things as well. And then we've got Cruelty of Gix. Oh no, we've already done reanimating things. I'm just putting... this is a good way of discarding things. But Cruelty of Gix is another one I should have mentioned actually, which is a way of bringing something back from the graveyard. What I like about that is it brings it back from any graveyard. So with Diagraph, that's from your graveyard. With Archpriest of Shadows, return it from your graveyard. Maybe we'll have some Cruelty of Gix, just because we can take things out of the opponent's graveyard if they happen to have good things. Okay, so yeah, discarding is where we were. So we've got the Shaman, discard a creature card, search another creature card, which is pretty good. We could have something like Dusk Mangler. Actually, it's really expensive, so we probably wouldn't. But when it, as an additional cost, to cast it, you have to discard a card, or pay for life, or sacrifice a creature. So we could choose to discard a card. But we're not going to be casting Dusk Mangler normally, so that wouldn't actually work out for us. So the other thing we have a really, really high mana curve at the moment because we have 6 7-drop creatures and we have 4 of these 5 mana. In fact, I'm probably going to take out Cruelty of Gix. I guess so, because we've got so many 5 mana things that we're actually having a really, really high mana curve, which is kind of normal for a Reanimator deck to have lots of high mana things, obviously, because we want to get those big things out. But we need to make sure we have some things we can do early on to deal with the opponent as well. So we've got a couple of ways of discarding cards. We've got ways to reanimate, and we've got big things to reanimate. So now we just need to fill out the deck with other things that are going to help us survive longer. So we probably want to have some kind of removal. Cut down's always a good one. And then we could have go for the throat, because that's always a good one too. I do like to have a couple of other things in there as well. So Infernal Grasp, because the opponent will have artifacts every so often. And then we might even want a Chivalrous Edict, just to deal with Planeswalkers specifically, or opponents' creatures that have ward or hexproof or something. We can make them sacrifice them instead. And then we want to have... we don't necessarily need anything to deal with graveyards, as in like a graveyard trespasser that's going to take things out. But one thing we might want to have is something like a Flesh Gorger, because although it's a 7 mana spell in its normal cost, it's actually going to be, instead of being up here with the big things, we're probably going to cast it on turn 3, so it's actually, the curve is a bit lower than it looks. And if the opponent kills it, then we've got something we can reanimate, and the reanimated version is much better than the prototype version we're going to be casting to start with. So it's a great thing to have in there. So we've got a good amount of removal of different types here. We've got, mostly black. We've got a few big green things. And let's see what else we need to have. We've got 55 cards out of 60. We probably don't need to put any extra lands in, although we have quite a high curve. We could put extra lands if we want to, but considering our strategy kind of takes us up to 5 mana, we probably don't need to add more. If the game does go on longer, then we should be able to draw enough lands anyway. So we've got a few more cards. We might want to have something like, it's more removal, but we might need it. So exile artifacts or enchantments. Nice to have that kind of versatility. And then we've got 3 cards left. One thing that is actually really good with discarding is Celestus. It's also good with any deck that has more than one color. So it can be, it's 3 mana, it can be used as any 1 mana of any color. So if we want to get to the bigger things that cost 3 green or 7 mana in total, it's going to help us do that. But also, as it becomes day or night, we get to draw cards and discard cards. So having another way to discard things is good. I normally have 2 of these in there if I really want to use them in the deck. You could go with 3. It's never a problem if you draw an extra one, because when you cast it, it helps you filter out, so you can always put spare ones into the graveyard. So we could go with this. We don't have much to protect Liliana apart from lots of removal. Oh, another thing we could do actually, maybe... let's see, anything else we can take out? Just thinking, if we have the Archpriest, we want to have something that can do damage to the opponent. There's no point having backup if we don't have a creature to put backup onto. So let's... And the Shaman isn't great, it's a 2/2. It would be, what, a 3/3 Death Touch. The opponent might want to block because it has an extra ability. So it's possible... What we might want is something else that has some extra evasion. So maybe flying or menace, or if there was first strike or something like that, maybe even trample, because trample would be great because it's always going to do combat damage to the opponent. So maybe we'll see if we've got anything with trample that comes out small. Obliterator, sure. They don't want to block that. Scavengers. No. I mean, Blood Vial Purveyor is flying and trample, so there's a good chance that they won't be able to deal with that. Or we could just give Audacity to something, which gives it trample, or something like Gaia's Gift. Anything else we could include? Bloated Contaminator is good, although the Proliferate doesn't really add anything to the deck, apart from Archpriest having backup. So probably not that necessary. Kodama would be good because it would give itself trample if it was modified. And Doomscar also has backup and trample, and can look for other cards in your library, which is pretty useful as well. So there's lots of things we could add. Maybe what I'll do is go back to black. Just because we have the majority black, I don't want to have to rely on green to start with. I'm definitely going to have more black mana. We could have anything else. Death Touch. No, we have Death Touch anyway. A 1/1 flyer they might not want to block. Or it's probably something like Evolved Sleeper that can get stronger is a good thing to get down early on. Or let's see, where's it gone? Oathsworn is a good one. So it's Menace. It gets to get stronger. And then you can search your library for a specific card if it gets 4+1 counters on it, and Archpriest helps it gets +1 counters on it. So actually I might include a couple of those, maybe take out one, maybe one cut down. So okay, let's have a look at the deck. Let's see if we've got everything we need. We might have to change some of the lands. Oh yeah, we need to get the 2-color lands, don't we? So let's have a look at what lands we have. I might not have all the best ones to add here, but let's see what we've got. We're going to add the rare lands from Kamigawa, so it's an extra way of dealing with artifacts or enchantments that we need to deal with. So we can get rid of those. And then we want to have any other green and black lands. We've got the Death Cap Glade that comes in tapped when we control 2 or more other lands, so the slow lands. So we want to have those. I don't have fast lands. Do we even have fast lands at the moment? Maybe we don't. I've got Llanowar Waste as well, so they do damage to us, which is not ideal. But there you go. It's one way of getting the colours out if we need it. And then the other ones we could go with, but I'm going to leave them as they are for now. Or the other thing we could do is go for something like Zeotora's Proving Ground. So that gives us the black and the green, and we can cycle it for 3 mana if we don't need it. We can draw something else. So, let's see. Maybe I'll include a couple of those. We don't want to have too many. Okay, so we've got a good number of swamps and forests. You can have a look at the deck and you can see how many of each color you have. So we have 22 black pips and we have 12 green pips. So there's not really that many green in comparison to the number of black. So that might mean that we don't want to have so many green lands. We need a lot more black lands. So at the moment we've got lots that can be casters, that can give us black or green mana. But apart from that, we probably want just as many swamps as we can pretty much get to make sure we can cast all these things. And then we'll have a quick look at the deck again. So we've got Flesh Gorger here as a 3-drop, even though it can be a 7. We'll probably use it here. So we have some ways of dealing with the opponent, some ways of removing all kinds of things. We have discard here, Celestus, so Fauna Shaman, Liliana and Celestus are always discard. We've got some early creatures that have Menace, so some type of evasion. So we can use Archpriest with the backup to be able to reanimate things from the graveyard, and Diagraph Rebirth when we destroy things or when things get removed. We can cast this for even less to bring back some of these big things from the graveyard. One other thing with Celestus, which is really good, is because it can be 1 mana of any color, when you have extra abilities, like on Toxrill, we can pay 1 blue and 1 black to sacrifice a slug and draw a card. Then we can use Celestus to pay that blue for us if we want to. Or we could add some kind of, black and blue or green and blue lands to the deck if we really wanted to. But probably won't. It probably won't come up very often, but if we want to do it, it's there. So there's other things you could add to the deck. There's things like Shieldred. There's other good cards that you might want to add, generally good cards. But this is just an example of what we might want to do just to stick to this strategy really closely. So that's all we've got time for the Reanimator deck. Let me know in the comments below if you use this style of deck, what you think of this particular build, what changes you would make and all those kind of things. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So thanks for watching this one to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one.